pitch. Swing and a miss. Struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball. Graham Lynch does it again and stays perfect for the 2008 season. 48 for 48 in save opportunities, and let the city celebrate.
Aloha and hello out there, everybody. What's going on? This is Miho from the Too Close to Call podcast series, coming to you with the Phillie Phanatics series, where we're talking everything about your first place fighting Phils.
What's up, everybody? Pags is here, and I can't get past the fact with this team about how when they win, it looks great, and people are like, yep, we're a contender. And then when they lose, it's something so bad that we're like, is this team good or is this team bad? I can't figure it out, Mio.
I know, man, and the microcosm of that is the Gabe Kapler crowd, who, from the flyby level, first place Phillies, a ton of injuries, Gabe must be doing well. But when you're watching day in and day out, every move he makes in the bullpen is criticized. With all these injuries and everything going on, for the Phils to be in first place and really not have put together that stretch of great baseball for an extended period of time is something that, as a fan base, I think we need to be happy about on June 11th.
Yeah, and there's no time to get hot like when you're playing 20 straight divisional games. So hopefully that is where they hit their stride in late June.
That's coming up here after the Diamondbacks series, but right now we're talking about this past series with the Reds, where the Phils take 2 of 3. It could have been a sweep, but there was some more turnover before the series even started. We found out on their way back from L.A. that Adam Hazley has a tweaked groin or hip, and there's something going on there. So the guy comes up, has a huge double against the Padres, and then 48 hours later is on the injured list, man. The Phils just cannot catch a break.
Well, it was the Yankees in the beginning of the year, and now we're catching that bug. It's like, oh my God, everybody. It's our bullpen. It's McCutchen going down. It's Roman Quinn can't get healthy and get back out there. So we got to throw our utility infielder out into the outfield where he's rarely played. I mean, Roman Quinn was supposed to be on his rehab assignment, and then he wasn't. And then I heard that last night, which would have been Monday, he is playing 7 innings in the field, and then he's supposed to be 9 in the DH, but he keeps getting pushed back. So hopefully he gets healthier and we can see him. But man, dude, it's like, we got to make a couple moves here because we don't know who we're going to have and who we're not going to have for the stretch of the second half of the season.
I'm hoping this last injury is not the straw that breaks the camel's back because, as you mentioned, the domino effect is pretty big with this one because you move Kingery to center field. That's fine. He's hitting out there. He'll be okay, but that puts Franco back in the lineup at third base every day. And if you dive a little bit deeper into his stats, listen to these, Pags. Over the last 30 games, he's hitting 151 with a 210 on-base percentage and a 258 slugging percentage. He has been horrendous. So that 8-hole hitter, yeah, he's Mike Moustakas. We don't need Manny Machado talk is gone.
For as hot as he was at the beginning, it cooled off even colder. And it's like, imagine if he didn't have that beginning stretch where he was homering almost every game. What his stats would look like. It would be dreadful.
And to be a fair podcast, as much in the past as we've talked up Casar Hernandez as a professional hitter and almost an all-star through the first couple of months, since he's moved into the leadoff spot, give or take a couple of games, but in the last 15 games, he's hitting 158 with a 226 on-base percentage. And you need more out of that, out of the leadoff spot. What a drop-off that is from McCutchen, as you mentioned earlier, just due to an injury, man. That production at the top of the lineup, and that affects Harper and Hoskins behind them because, as I'm rambling here, we'll continue on to the Harper-Hoskins train, but these two gentlemen are hitting for better average. The last 15 games for Harper, he's actually hitting 300. and he only has 2 home runs and limited RBIs. In the last 15 games, Rhys is hitting .309, so they've both become more of these contact hitters, but they don't have any home runs or RBIs because the guys like Hernandez aren't getting on base at a rate McCutchen was for the ability for these guys to drive in runs.
Take it back to Casar. Comfortable in the 7-hole hitter there. We move him up. He has to take more pitches. Obviously, he isn't getting as good of pitches as he would in the 7-hole hitter, batting behind Harper, Hoskins, Real Muto. Does that have something to do with this drop-off of his?
Oh, absolutely. The 7-hole and the leadoff spot are totally different from Casar's perspective as well as the opponent's perspective because, as you just mentioned, when you get through those guys, you tend to exhale in the middle of the lineup and typically see more fastballs at the bottom end. Now, in the leadoff spot, he's trying to see what the pitcher has, take pitches, so he's going to be hitting in less hitter-friendly counts more often than not, just due to the fact that he's going to look at a breaking ball early so everybody else can see it, even though it was a hittable pitch. And that conversation can evolve into how deep of a conversation we want to get into, but the offense as a whole, Pags, has really been an issue for this team. And with the names that you mentioned, they should not be 18th in average, 20th in home runs, 17th in on-base percentage, give or take, depending on which day you're looking at. But for all those names and all the money added, for them to literally be a middle-of-the-road offense, what do they need to do to pick it up here, man? It's the middle of June. We're getting into hitting season, and things are not taking off like we expected them to.
Well, the main thing I feel is they don't need to press because there's so much more baseball to play, and we can still hit our stride. Hoskins is the streakiest hitter known to man, so he's going to hit his homers in bunches there. And, yeah, you don't want that. You want that to happen at the right time, so hopefully it does. But Harper's swinging the bat well. Eventually they're going to start leaving the ballpark because every time I look at the box score, Harper at least has a double with a couple ribbies. So that's positive to see. Segura keeps doing his thing, and maybe they do add a bat. But thing we haven't touched on yet is the trade we made is turning out to be great because Jay Bruce is on some type of level, and it's crazy.
He was named the NL Player of the Week this past week for his first week in a Phillies uniform, and Pags, I hope Jay Bruce rubs off on the other Phillies because I think they have a little bit of an approach problem at the plate. Their philosophy is to see a lot of pitches, work counts, get into the bullpen early. The problem is they're not capitalizing on the mistakes that the opposing team is making. And I always revert back to the Jake Arrieta start in LA, where it was clear that the Dodgers had a plan that Arrieta, when he misses, it tends to be with his slider, and it tends to be in this hitting zone. So I'm going to sit on that basically every pitch because I know I'm going to get one of those mistakes during this at-bat. And when I do, I'm going to capitalize on it. And I think the Phillies have a little bit too much of a I'll take this pitch to work the count to see more pitches and less of the this is what I'm looking for in this moment. If I get it, I'm going to pounce and not I'm going to allow more pitches in this at-bat because I want to get into the bullpen in the 6th inning. Like, I understand it from a philosophy side of things, but when it's this far into the season and you're in the middle of the pack, you have to make some sort of adjustment here.
Yeah, hopefully start to kind of change their philosophy. I don't know if that starts with Gabe or who that starts with, but it's sure going to rub off on them because we need it.
And that's the other discussion nowadays is what the hell are hitting coaches doing day in and day out, and what type of influence do they have on these hitters? But it's clear, man, people like the Cubs, the Dodgers, and 2 of the top teams in baseball offensively are the Twins and Astros. They are number 1 and 2 in fewest pitches per plate appearance. The Phillies are on the total other side of the spectrum. And I think that's because those teams obviously have huge home run totals because they know nowadays pitchers throw hard, and there's not as many Greg Maddux out there that are painting on the corners as there are Vince Velasquez as, here it is, hit it. And they're sitting on a pitch in a situation knowing they're going to get it eventually and doing damage when it happens. And that's what Jay Bruce has done for the past week. He's been sitting on these breaking balls, these off-speed pitches, and when they're elevated, he's been able to take advantage. And I think that's something that as Harper and Hoskins, you got to look at and go, hey, man, what's going on up there mentally when you're hitting 5 home runs in 7 games?
Right. It can't just be the first start in Philly.
I know. It's not the new ballpark, man. You did it on the road in San Diego, which is known as a pitcher-friendly ballpark, so that makes it even more impressive. But we've danced around it here for upwards of about 10 minutes. Now we'll dive into some of the games specifically and some of the storylines. But as we mentioned, in Game 1, the Phillies come out and take the 4-2 victory with Zach Eflin giving them a quality start on the mound, with Vince Velasquez, who's suddenly the 8th inning guy with the injury to Sir Anthony we talked about, as well as Neris gets his 13th save in 13 chances.
We don't have that closer, but if you're going to rely on someone,
we sure do have a closer, man. He is definitely the guy. His ERA is under 2. He's 13 for 13. He is literally the only guy you can trust out there in the bullpen right now, and that is a ridiculous statement if I was telling myself 2 years ago that Neris is the only guy on a first-place team we can trust out of the bullpen.
But he goes kind of with the ebb and flow of the team. It's like, when he's good, but when he's bad, it looks horrible. And you're like, oh my God, we have to rely on this guy?
Hasn't blown a save yet, and that may be kind of part of the mentality. He had the one in L.A. where he gave up the home run, but that was tied, and closers are typically not at their best when it's a non-save situation, and I know you're going to have to use him because he's the only arm we trust, but when it comes to that type of scenario, I'm definitely a little less confident, not only in Neris, but just kind of that whole usage of the bullpen.
We need starters to go 6-7 innings right now because we still don't have Robertson. We don't have all these guys that are coming back, but can you trust them when they get back? I mean, you would hope with the money we're paying Robertson and Neshek and Tommy Hunter that when they get back, it's like they never left and they're playing at the level of why we're paying them. So hopefully it all trails off and we're like, oh, remember that time in June where we were worried about it? No, we're not worried about it anymore.
They'll be like trade deadline additions, hopefully, here over the course of the next 2 months. But
for sure.
Nick Pivetta heard you loud and clear, Pags, with his best start in the major leagues. He goes a complete game, giving up 1 run, 6 strikeouts, and no walks. And that gets back to him since being called up. He's had 3 starts, and outside of that first inning, after he got dry humped, giving up 3 runs, he's given up a total of 1 run in 20 innings with 1 or 2 walks over that time frame. And it's just amazing when you can finally get through to these kids that your stuff is good enough if you don't put people on base for free and make them earn every opportunity they get, it's going to make you a better pitcher.
Yeah, and if he can do what he does, I'm not expecting not complete games every time out there. But if he can keep this up, and at least we have another starter that we can, I want to say rely on, but that's kind of a fluid term there because you can't really rely on any of these guys.
Oh my God, man! Over the last 2,
you don't know what you're going to get.
Over the last 2 weeks, he's been our best pitcher. Right now, Nick Pivetta's our ace since he's been back up. It's unbelievable, and breakout Pivetta still may have an opportunity here, and they call this pulling a Brett Myers, where you get sent down, and I found out that Pivetta actually never relocated to Allentown. He lived in Philadelphia the entire time and made the commute from Philly up to Allentown every day. So apparently that drive on the Northeast Extension for 45 minutes an hour gave him a lot of time to think and probably listen to the Too Close to Call podcast for some tips and tidbits on how to improve.
You know, I was going to say, he was probably like, hey, these guys keep tagging me in posts. maybe I'll listen to him. And then he listened to him, and he was like, all right, I got to do it for my boys, Miho and Pags. And he's sure listening. Shout out, Nick. We love you. Let's keep it rolling, buddy.
Well, that's why he dropped the F-bomb live on TV afterwards in the press conference. I don't know if you saw that, but they asked him how everything was going, and he's like, yeah, we're just fucking rolling right now. And him and Murph both looked at each other and were like, yeah, okay, back to you guys up in the booth.
He channeled his inner Chase Utley there.
That's it. So we're rubbing off on him for his post-game press conferences. And that took us into Game 3, where, unfortunately, the Phillies coughed up a victory in this one and had a 3-1 lead heading into the 7th inning. And Aaron Nola, once again, getting through that 7th inning like we talked about, cruising through 6, but runs into trouble. And between him and the bullpen, just couldn't get out of it in time, and ultimately the Phils give one away 4-3 to the Reds.
Tough one to go. You wanted that sweep that we had talked about in the last podcast. You really wish you would have swept the Reds there, but taking 2 of 3, like we said, that's what you got to keep doing. It sucks when it's a winnable game where you're like, we had that one.
Aaron Nola gives up a couple of hits. Then they go to Alvarez, who gives up 2 hits and 1 run, ultimately takes the loss. Velasquez and J.D. Hammer, scoreless innings out of the pen. Velasquez, a couple of hits and a walk. Not clean, but continues to kind of settle into that back end role, and I think he's going to be the setup guy moving forward. But as we touched on at the beginning of the show, they have one more series outside of the division here with the Diamondbacks, who come in an extremely hot ball club, Pags. If you haven't been paying attention, they've won 4 in a row coming into Citizens Bank, but the Phillies catch a break, not seeing Zach Greinke or Robbie Ray in this series, and with those being the top 2 pitchers for the Diamondbacks, you're hoping that the 2 out of 3 train can continue down the tracks.
And maybe we can start talking to the Diamondbacks front office and be like, hey, you want to leave one of these guys here? We'll give you a couple people on your trip home.
Hey, on Greinke's bullpen in between starts he's throwing here this week, why don't we go ahead and take a look at that one, Mr. Scouts, from the press box where nobody can see you watching.
No doubt.
We'll see, but like we mentioned, 27, I think it is, straight divisional games coming up after the Diamondbacks. We're going to be right around tied with the Braves. I think it's 1 game at time of recording here, so that's going to be a true test, playing them for the first time since the opening series down in Atlanta, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with you guys out there. So in the meantime, give us a follow, subscribe us. Please, please, please share us with your friends. Help us out at Too Close to Call Cast on all the podcast platforms, social media platforms, and we'd love to hear from you and what you guys are thinking about this Phillies team that's hanging on by a thread.
While you're listening to this, I want to leave you with a thought that I would like to hear from some people on social media. Who's your most hated divisional rival in baseball? Because you get it left and right, you get Braves, you get Mets. I would like to know what the majority of people think. So we'll discuss that before we dive into these divisional rounds, but I want to hear what everyone thinks, because I think it sways back and forth per the year, but who's your most hated?
We'll find out from you guys here on the next pod as we talk about a key stretch coming up for your Fightin' Phils.
Go Phils. We'll catch you after the Diamondbacks series, guys. Later.
Peace.
The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball. Brad Lynch does it again and stays perfect for the 2008 season. 48 for 48 in save opportunities, and let the city celebrate.